Hello, everyone. This is Ushul Uysal Kalvelli. We are live on LinkedIn, and this is going to be also shared on Unique Careers, Unique Lives podcast. Today, I am here with Scott Perry. Welcome, Scott.
Right.
I talk with people who inspire me, especially. And this talk is called Unique Careers, Unique Lives. And I want this to be inspiring conversation. So I'm very grateful that I have inspiring people around me like Scott. Scott Perry is an encore life coach helping people in midlife reconnect with their soul's true calling and turn it onto a fulfilling part-time coaching business. Scott has pursued several vocations, navigating from a successful career as a professional musician to a 4-year contract as a head coach at Seth Godin's Akimbo workshops, and now as a leader of a movement to help others turn their midlife into their best life. So I love this bio. Sorry, I messed it up a bit there. It's a part-time coaching business. I think there was a slip for me, like I need it full-time. Scott, how do you define your work? So that's a beautiful definition I can hear, but I know that work, the calling and vocation is very important to you. So when you are defining your work from deep within, what is coming as your vocation?
It's a great question. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to be in this conversation with you. And so there's a book whose title is Work, and the author is escaping me. But one of the things that it's a fairly thick book, and it's really full of insights. But one of the things that the author does is defines what work is, and work is really just merely the exchange of energy, right? So all living things work. Plants take nutrients from the ground and water from the air and sunlight from above, and it exchanges all that energy and turns it into chlorophyll and leaves and buds and fruits and all this sort of thing. Humans are really unique in that we're the only creatures, at least that we are aware of, that define themselves. They build identity through the work that they do.
Wow.
And so I think that that's a really fascinating idea, that our, work is how we find fulfillment, forge meaning, and, make a difference in our lives. And so many of us go through experiences where, we are doing work that does not feel very fulfilling, does not feel very meaningful, does not feel like it's making a difference. And so it's just this interesting back and forth. I'm someone that, went through schooling, did very well, enjoyed the process of learning and becoming educated, and went into teaching at a certain point right after college. But at the same time, I recognize that there's a lot about institutionalized schooling that does not feel very engaging or meaningful with people. So, we have this system, at least here in the United States, where we're trying to, put everybody on a path. Like if you follow our follow society's rules, we will reward you with, salary and status and stuff. And many people get to be my age and find that they have put forth all this energy, done all this work, and not come to the fulfillment, the meaning. And so this is when many of us, between the ages of 40 and 65, start to think about vocation. What's our calling? What is life calling us to do? What is our internal purpose wanting to speak through us? And I've been very lucky in that I feel I've lived through a series of callings. I was a teacher and enjoyed teaching, and then I was a musician and enjoyed being a musician. Then I became a guitar teacher and enjoyed that. And now as an encore life coach, I'm finding at every moment, I feel like, oh, now I've finally figured out what I'm really supposed to do. When actually, in every moment, I've been very blessed and lucky to have landed in the work that I was meant to do in that moment. And I was able to do it until it no longer fulfilled me and something else availed itself to me. And, I have a lot of privilege that is in play around that is not lost upon me. So I'm just incredibly grateful for my own experience. And it is thrilling and engaging and very rewarding to help other people find their soul's true calling and to turn that into something that, um, helps them make a difference, but also make a living at the same time.
I know that you had a title for yourself. I don't know if you're still using it, Chief Difference Maker. How did you receive receive this information that you are Chief Difference Maker?
Yeah. Well, it's, one of the benefits of being, I've been my own boss almost all my adult life. And so the running joke I always share with people is if you want to really work for a jerk, work for yourself, right? So
I
and I
can
say that
understand.
very tongue in cheek, but actually for a long time, I really was the world's worst boss to myself. I did a lot of, grinding and long hours and, I did a lot of things the hard way. And came to find that unnecessarily so. I think, one of the things I found is that if you start with the fundamentals and do the essential things and until you learn to do them effortlessly, it doesn't take a lot of energy to make the change that you seek to make in the world. And when I shifted into, the coaching space and was doing a lot of writing and doing some broadcasting of my own, um, you have to decide what's your title. And, a lot of people say founder or CEO, and those things just didn't sound very interesting to me. It's like, if I'm gonna work for myself, I'm gonna have a cool title. So I played around with a bunch of different things. I was a possibilitist for a while, chief transformation officer for a while. And then I started a community in 2018 called Difference Makers, where I was gathering people that I had met through Akimbo and Alt MBA, and then just through my work whose work and the way they presented in the world just really inspired me. And I just started calling them the Difference Makers. And since I was the one that organized the community, it just seemed like a natural thing, like, oh, I'll just be the chief difference maker. And so I really appreciate you asking this question, because it's a title that has served me well, because it's something people often ask me about. And that's usually a sign of pretty good branding. If people are talking about it, you probably got something that's worth hanging on to.
Oh, it sounds great. I want to repeat what I heard from you. You passed it very quickly, but that was for me. Wow. You said if you want to make or do the service that you are meant to do in this world, you said it more beautiful than I did. You have to first focus on essentials, and then you make these essentials into a sort of discipline. You didn't say it that way. Again, that's my words. And it becomes effortless. So when you kind of plan your work from that perspective, then your work becomes kind of a flow, I felt like. And for me, that was very powerful. And that was for you so true to your, I think that's so normal for you to say, but to me, like, bam, it had such a huge impact. I felt you talked about the discipline of doing the work that is the core of your service to the world.
Yeah, well, you articulated it back very beautifully, and I love that you chose the word discipline, because I think that is, if you're going to make change happen, and you're not going to rely on chance and good fortune and the stars aligning in your favor and the universe conspiring to help you, discipline is required. human beings are creatures that make sense of themselves, their situation, the world, each other through narrative. And usually it's the stories we tell ourselves inform what become our fundamentals. And we often tell stories to ourselves, about our situation and other people, that are actually impeding our ability to do the things that we say we want, to reach the goals that we're striving for. And one of the things that I've been really thinking about recently is in my last book, Onward, I had this catchphrase, choose your story, choose your future, that really captured a lot of people's imaginations. And I've shared it many times, and I've had it shared back at me. And recently I've been thinking that's only really telling half of what needs to be told, because it's not just I'm telling a story that's impeding my progress. I have to tell a better story. It's not always that simple, because a good story has a point. It's about something. And so if you start with what's the thing that I want, and fundamentally what has to happen for that to happen, you've now defined the essential things, the fundamentals. And now the fundamentals, you can build a narrative on the fundamentals that will help you tell a truer, more helpful story that you can live into as you are stepping into the possibility that you're trying to create for yourself. If I'll just reflect real quickly, give an example. I have a client who I've been working with for over 3 years now. And she is an absolute dynamo. She is changing the way we engage in culture conversations in institutions all over the country. And she's writing a book that really lays out her process. She's got a really well-tested, vetted process for how she helps corporations, institutions, foundations build cultures that are truly diverse, inclusive, and equitable, not just paying lip service to those ideas. And we were talking about the book, and she said, I really hate writing. So now she's starting with this narrative. I don't like to write. And so, I said, well, fundamentally, what's involved in creating a book? It's collecting ideas on paper. This person is wonderful on camera, wonderful on her feet, can speak extemporaneously about all of her ideas, can just show up on a live video, and she's articulate and she's masterful and riveting and engaging. So I said, if all you need to do is turn on your app that turns voice to text, and you can speak your first draft right onto the page with almost no effort. You already know all the layout of the book. So, and it was, all of a sudden she was doing work that she really felt was important for her to do, and doing it in a way that focused on the essentials, and was able to do it in a way that was effortless. And so suddenly, this narrative of I don't like to write, or I'm not a good writer, is now no longer impeding their progress, because all I have to do is get words on paper, and I can do that in ways that are easy for me, come naturally for me, and I can go from there. So I think starting with fundamentals and then creating a narrative that is built from the fundamentals for the purpose, for the intention that you're setting for yourself, can be really powerful.
While I was listening to you, when you started first this idea of the narrative, when you create your story, you create your future, and you focus on the change you want to make or you want to see in the world. And I was asking myself, I think when I started with my self-employment, being my the jerk boss to myself, I wanted a change, to make a change, But then it wasn't really the way that who I was, something like this. Like when you gave the example, so there is a change we want to make, but at the same time, it might not be necessarily the first way that came to us how we will create this change. So setting the vision and then finding our own ways of serving this, which you said, the effortless way, where the connecting back to what work is the energy exchange. I think you allow the energy to flow in a in an effortless way, in the maximum possibility, the speed, the power. So you need to decrease somehow the friction or create the right friction for still allowing yourself to grow, but allows you to give and be creative. So that was an interesting dynamic to hear, to be reminded of myself. And I find when you start this acting on the story changes as well, right? You discover about who you are. So that has been my experience. So then you write a new story or twist your stories. And I think you have acted on your stories, and I hear you experimenting, creating new projects. So how is your process of setting yourself up with this vision and then allowing it to evolve on the way?
It's a really great question. I have been a student of Stoic philosophy since I was in the 7th grade, and specifically through the journal of Marcus Aurelius, that what are called Meditations. And in that philosophical tradition, which has informed positive psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, rational emotive behavior therapy, it's a philosophy that has stood the test of time, and is a philosophy about navigating the uncertainties and adversities of public life, of living out loud and in public, with equanimity, with tranquility. And one of the stories that is part of the Stoic tradition, but also in the Taoist tradition and the Hindu tradition, is the story of the archer. And the short version of that is an archer has an aim in mind. The archer aims for the bullseye, of course, and the archer prepares themselves. They maintain their equipment. They have the best equipment they can afford. They maintain it. They take care of their physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. They practice every day. And, when the archer steps on the archery field and sets their sights on the target and draws back the arrow, at that moment, when the arrow is released, the archer has done everything that they can do to influence the result that they want. And they must be then unattached to what happens. They may or may not hit that target. Someone might run across the field and take the arrow in the throat. The wind may kick up, the arrow blown off course, or the target falls over. And the reason why that parable is so important to me is because I think it's, with our goals, our aims, our aspirations, it's a both and situation. You should have aims and aspirations, points on the horizon that you're moving toward. And again, at least in the United States, we are taught this idea of, grit and grinding your way towards this preconceived goal, and putting the blinders on. And what happens is we miss all the opportunities that we could never have anticipated. And we get really flummoxed by all the obstacles that we could never have imagined were going to show up. And so, what I was hearing in your question is this, we need to have a point on the horizon we're heading to, but we also need to remain open, present, mindful in the moment that we're in every day for those obstacles and opportunities. And when obstacles arise, are they opportunities in disguise? Is there lessons and silver linings in there? And so, you're heading in a direction, but then there's this, to use your word again, this daily discipline of small steps, and you test and tweak, again, using your words, along the way. You may not end up exactly where you thought you were going to be, but you'll end up somewhere really great. This has been incredibly true for me in all the things that I've done. I had very different ideas about the way I was going to do what I do, and where I was going to end up doing what I do. And haven't, and it looks very different now. And it's also looks really great right now. And the thing that we forget is we set goals for ourselves, like, I need to have this much money, or this kind of house in this neighborhood, or this kind of car. Like, that's what success is. And that's, in the United States, it's written into our Declaration of Independence. That's the pursuit of happiness. Happiness is determined by whether or not you acquire the money and stuff that you set out to acquire. And people that acquire all that are not always very happy people, certainly not the most happy people I've encountered. And of course, if you don't acquire those things, it's an invitation to shame and suffering. The way I look at it is all of that is side effects. If you are doing the work that you're meant to do, the work that life is calling you to do so it can speak through you, and you do that work with integrity and intention, with and for people you care about, aligning who you are with what you're good at and where you belong, what I have found is that prosperity, passion, purpose, position, all these things that we think are the point, just naturally occur as side effects of doing meaningful work with and for the right people. And so that's kind of a long-winded explanation to something that I think is the very short distilled lesson comes from the Bhagavad Gita. You are entitled to your work, not the fruits of your work. You're entitled to, if you are doing the work that you're meant to do and you're putting forth your best effort, the effort and the process, the journey is the reward, not what you get from it. Those things will or will not happen as destiny decides. But if you're doing the work that you're meant to do and you're doing it with intention and integrity, you will be a good person and you will have a good life.
I love it. And that brings me to what I wanted to ask you. Well, I'm asking you already, but before this recording started, I was telling Scott there's something that I read on your website, and I'm very curious about this, is that you talk about, of course, you talk about calling, and then you are talking about tuning into it. You are not saying it in this way. Again, you are saying it in a different way. I thought I made a note for myself, but I don't find it anymore. Pay attention to what life is telling you is what you have wrote. And that was my curiosity. How do you pay attention? And where do you feel, where do you hear this? And connecting it back, I wanted to hear your moments in life where you made these changes. What was this attention like?
That's another great question. So when we are talking about calling or vocation, or some people might call it passion or purpose, whatever you want to call this thing that this unique gift that you possess. I love the Parker J. Palmer writes about teaching and vocation quite a bit, and he has a book called Let Your Life Speak, which is actually an old Quaker maxim that he has kind of repurposed as your life's calling, your vocation, like speaking. These are my words now, but this idea that life is speaking to you because it wants to speak through you. So weaving back in some of my love for the Bhagavad Gita and the principles of Stoic philosophy, I believe in destiny. I believe that everything in our lives is unfolding as it was meant to unfold. And some people have said, or would say, well, if life is just going to happen the way it's meant to happen, why do anything? Why not just sit back and wait to see what happens? And in Stoicism, they call that the lazy argument, because yes, destiny is unfolding. It's cause and effect, and it's unfolding the way it's going to unfold. And you still have a role to play. You have in the Bhagavad Gita, they would call it your duty, your path. And so this idea of paying attention is, you can only you pay attention. That's a very presence, mindful, here and now thing to do. If you're paying attention to all the old stories you're telling yourself about all the misfortune and missed opportunities you've had in the past, that's just an invitation to continue to suffer. You're paying attention to something that can't be changed, and you're repeating a story that's not fueling your well-being or spiritual, mental, or physical health. If you're paying attention to all the things in the future that you want to happen, that must happen for you to fulfill this idea you have of what happiness is, you're just creating anxiety. So for me, these are all kind of, this is all fear-based. We have what's happened in the past. Regret is a form of fear. Anxiety is a form of fear. But when we're in the here and now, it's nothing but opportunity. There's nothing but upside available. Yes, there's risk, of course, but if we're paying attention to what's going on right now, we possess everything we need to frame ourselves, frame our situation, frame our choices, decide and do what we feel needs to be done next. And we will simply be putting ourselves into the next moment, where we can just rinse and repeat this process. And we can, again, be agents of our destiny, not just victims of destiny or victims of fated moments along the way. So I think I call this idea stillness in motion, because you have to be both at the same time. You have to be, presence, mindfulness, that there's requires a certain amount of stillness. You need to be able to be paying attention and aware and acknowledging what is happening, and, framing your choices and decisions and what you're going to do next. But you also have to be operating in the world. You also have to be doing things. And so, that's one of the great benefits of being a human being, is that we can hold opposing ideas, contradictory ideas in our head at the same time, and they can both be true at the same time, even though they are in direct conflict. So I just, for me, I guess the final thing I would weave in is one of the things that I say frequently to my clients, and when I was a coach in Akimbo workshops, we tend to take ourselves and our work a little bit too seriously. And I always, when I feel that, either in my own experience in the work I'm doing, or in a situation where I catch other people's taking themselves or their work a little bit too seriously, I just say, I think it's supposed to be fun, because I really do think that we, that I don't remember who said this, but we're not human beings seeking a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings seeking a human experience. What a ridiculous thing. Who would ever choose to be this thing called a human? And yet that's the game we get to play. And the point of a game is to play. And you can play a finite game where you get to conquer everyone and win all the Monopoly money and have all the houses on Boardwalk. That's not going to necessarily make you happy. But if you play a game where part of the winning is that everyone gets to play, then you create a situation where everyone can experience the abundance and the joy and the equanimity of what happens when you're working when you're doing the work you're meant to do with and for people you care about in community, collaboratively, creatively. Yeah. And so I'm not even sure I answered your original question.
That's beautiful. You went
Yes.
into beautiful places. And while you were describing in the beginning about, I cannot put it back, that like to be, yes, you said to be in the motion in stillness. Like how you said it, remind me. Your words are
Still,
nicer.
stillness in motion.
Stillness in motion. And I felt like the practice feels to me like the story that we are creating, the service, the change that we want to make creates a certain shape for us. Like
Mhm.
we are holding ourselves in a posture together, and but we are still kind of opening ourselves up. We are not losing ourselves here and there. We are energetic beings, but there is a certain uh, holding to us, which is given to us by the intention that we set for the moment. And then by time, we can take in and we can see the changes that are happening and align ourselves to that. This alignment aspect was very pronounced for me when you were, especially in the beginning, telling how to follow this calling, how to pay attention. You align yourself with the world. And then you said the gifts appear as a side effect. All these that we strive for comes as a side effect. But the main thing is this, I feel, the alignment, if I heard you correctly.
Yeah. Well, it's alignment is a great word for it. And I think that's part of this process of seeking and serving your vocation is you're aligning with who you really are, what you're really good at, and where you really belong. I also like the framing of, and I shared this in my book Onward, of being integrated, integrated being. You know, when we're talking about work, we're often having these conversations about work-life balance. I don't know if anybody tuning in has ever tried to and achieved work-life balance. I've never known anybody to actually find the balancing point, let alone keep it there. Um, there was a point in my career when I was still a performing musician. I was teaching 40 guitar lessons a week in my studio, still homeschooling my sons, happily married, and coaching in Akimbo and building this other business. That's a lot of stuff, So as I'm weaving through all the various activities associated with each of these things, I felt like I had to like keep changing my hat, or like I had to do something like, oh, I have to like become the performer now. Oh, I have to be a teacher now. Oh, I have to be a father now, a husband now, a coach now. It was exhausting. And one day I just said, I am just going to show up as the best Scott Perry I can possibly muster in this moment everywhere I go. I'm going to be me everywhere I go. And that by just showing up as a fully integrated human being, bringing in the best of who I was as a performer, teacher, husband, father, coach, suddenly all the noise disappeared and the signal became just very, very clear. And so I think, just to kind of build on what you were saying around alignment, when you are fully aligned, I think you're also fully integrated. You see yourself within the context, you're aligned from the inside out. You know who you are, where you stand, what you're here to do, who to refer to your shape, the boundaries and guardrails, what you do, what you don't do, who you do it with and for, and who you don't. And it enables you to just, do this very, very complicated and challenging, living thing with a greater sense of joy and equanimity.
An image appeared for me while you talked about, I kind of brought out the best of me as a musician, as a coach. And to me, something like a button, when the button is not pressed, it's it's inside, so it feels like there are parts of us that are covered, and then kind of tune it out, like activate it, be fully yourself. And it would be interesting for me to imagine which parts of myself I am kind of hiding, and then how would it look like if I am fully present with my whole identities here and there, trying to fit here, trying to fit there. But while I'm telling this to you, I feel like, isn't there also roles that we have? So we kind of use ourselves in different ways in each places. So I'm holding, as you said, two poles right now in my mind. So it makes me very excited to think that this big self that I have everything, I give everything in every moment. But at the same time, is it a way of being when we tune into what that moment requires and just activate parts of ourselves? I don't know if that question even makes sense, or that reflection.
No,
How did it land on you?
no, it's a beautiful articulation of, in Stoic philosophy. I think it's Cicero talks about the four roles. There's your role, individual, like for yourself, your role in society, your role at work, and yes, each role requires that we bring in, that we weave in different elements of our talents and our wisdom. For me, it's something really interesting happens. So I'll just share a quick story that illustrates this. When I was in the alt MBA, I mean, my mind was just blown by there's all these new ideas, all these new ways of being, ways of speaking, ways of articulating, new ideas, and finding applications for them. And I felt like, I would have my experience of being in the alt MBA all day, and then I'd go into my studio, and it was like there was a lot of dissonance. Like, oh, I'm in this like little secret society where we all have a secret handshake and code words, and we talk about big ideas and all this. But now I'm going to go into this different world, a smaller world, more parochial, whatever. And then, like, about 2 weeks into this 4-week program, it's just like, what if I just started like bringing the ideas that I'm being, my mind is being blown by here, and I started bringing them into the way I help students, because when you're teaching someone to play the guitar, yes, it's about putting fingers to strings behind frets and strumming, and there's all this physical mechanical stuff, but you're also dealing with, fear, anxiety, sometimes regret, and so I had all these tools for helping people move past through their fears and anxieties, get out of their own way, and actually do the thing fundamentally that they really wanted to do. And what I found was, like, the language of, alt MBA actually transferred completely. It was a lingua franca that crossed all the boundaries of my life. And so I could bring these things into my, being a father, being a coach. And so it's, again, both and. Yes, we have various roles we play, but we are also, as we move from role to role, we're still the same person. And we can, if we play with bringing ideas from one role into another role, we find new ways, maybe even better ways of fulfilling that role, by not just rigidly conforming to, like, this is the behavior, these are the ideas that apply, this is the behavior that's in bounds and out of bounds.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Every role that we have gives us a source of richness, which we can tap into in the other role as well. This wholeness that we have as human beings, we bring our humanness to every role that we have, and this, I think, is a source of creativity to tap into the everything that you are, all the knowledge, all the ways of being. You might be noticing I'm getting darker. I haven't calculated that now. Here is at this time is getting dark. I should have used the light. I want to talk so much more with you, but I am going to bring us into a closing. I am so inspired by the words that you are choosing. You create your own vocabulary. I feel like you have expressions for the experiences you can quote from Stoics, from the books and all. What is your practice that enriches you? You said this, the fundamentals. What is your discipline?
Well, my biggest discipline is, for those that are watching on video, I have a sign behind me that says less is more. And that's a gift from my wife because my default setting is to over explain, over design, I'm a more is more person by default. And, one of the biggest disciplines I've had to embrace in my life is this idea of less is more. How can I make a bigger impact by eliminating the things that are not really giving me the results, and by amplifying and leveraging the one or two things that are necessary. So in the last year, just in August of 2021, my son and daughter-in-law announced that they were expecting. And my wife and I we always wanted to be parents, and we always wanted to be grandparents. And we weren't sure that the grandparents thing, we were blessed with two, beautiful young boys who have grown into beautiful young men. But it didn't look like the grandchild thing was going to happen. So we were so thrilled when they announced. And I really made it a quest to fully live this discipline of less is more. And so the challenge that I put, because we wanted to be full-time grandparents. We provide daycare for our grandson 5 days a week from 7 a.m. until 5 p.m. So, that's a full-time job, really. So up to that point, I could easily spend 6, 8, 10 hours on my business. Now, that was not 6, 8, 10 hours of being on calls with clients where I was actually making money. This was content creation, social media posting, commenting, blah, 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 blah. Lots of and I decided that I'm going to craft my business so that I work 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I work from 5 to 7 in the morning. If I have client calls, when I have client calls, my wife and I just juggle back and forth because she also has an online business. But that was a real, that was my discipline. Like, how do I go from this overdo it man, which is what my kids have always called me, Mr. Overdo It Man, to being essential man, like essential and effortless man. And it took a year, but I've actually crafted this business now where I wake up at 5 a.m. I do the work that I have to do to, fulfill the things that I need to fulfill in my business. And then I'm done. And then I grab Jasper and, do his morning feeding, take him on a walk at the cemetery, and, just give my wife the entire morning so that she can work in her business. And then we just kind of share duty in the afternoon. And so, that's my practice of less is more, of defining what's essential and learning how to do it effortlessly. That's been my discipline for the last year or so. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. And I think it's something that I want to learn. I'm in the team. Do it too much. Yeah, I think choosing what is essential is an important discipline that we all can master, can
Well,
practice.
I would encourage you. One of the exercises I'm putting my clients through now is, what if you only had 2 hours a day?
Oh wow.
Like, what would you have to do to make the change that you seek to make in the world? If you could only, and it has been very illuminating and very enlightening for a number of my clients who have found that, the Pareto principle of 80/20, right? There's actually 80% of what they're doing is actually delivering, you know, not delivering a return on investment, it's delivering nothing or actually hurting their return on investment. And by eliminating that and going all in on the 20% of the necessary activities, they are doing better work, earning more money, working with better clients, and buying this enormous amount of time that they can, dedicate to other pursuits.
A great question. Thank you for this gift. I will be reflecting on that, and I hope the listeners will reflect and make the necessary changes so they will allow more freedom for themselves to be with life, to do also what is the most important. So, coming to the closing, how would you like us to end our conversation, including how can people reach you?
Sure. Well, if any of the ideas that I've been sharing are of interest, I just put on the website what I call the Art of Encore Living Quick Start Guide. And it's the 5 essential steps that I have found um, that will help you define the difference only you can make and turn that into a fulfilling part-time online lifestyle business that will help you make a difference while you make a living. And so that's available for free on the site, creativeonpurpose.com. And in terms of, I guess I would just invite anyone that has made it this far into our conversation to, well, I'll give you the first step in the book. If, Richard Rohr, Parker J. Palmer, David Brooks' Second Mountain, these are all books about finding fulfillment and prosperity in the second half of life. And so usually a lot of us find this, at some point in that 40 to 65 range. Many people, and I'm always really encouraged by, younger generations, seem to be arriving at this idea that the system is, the system that they were born into is broken and is delivering a lot of false promises, and they are seeking their own way of finding fulfillment and meaning in their lives. So, number one, the second half of life can begin whenever you decide that you're going to tap into who you really are, what you're really good at, where you really belong, define your unique gift, and leverage that in a way that helps you create a life of fulfillment, meaning, and prosperity. And one of the first step in my process is I call it the most important conversation you're ever going to have. And the most important conversation you're ever going to have is the one that you're going to have on your deathbed. And that is when you will be speaking to yourself about the things that you regret and the things that you feel are worth celebrating. If you were to have that conversation today, what would be on those 2 lists? Which list would be larger? And if, we don't know when our time is going to end, but any meaning our life has comes from what we did while our lives were ours to do something with. And so if you had that courageous conversation with yourself now and list your celebrations and your regrets, what could you do right now to shorten or to take away some of the things on the list of regrets and add to the things in your list of celebrations? And if you start with that exercise, I think you'll be on your way to finding your true soul's calling, and be on the path to turn that into a way of forging meaning, fulfillment, and prosperity in your life.
Oh, that was so beautiful. Thank you so much. My heart opened right now, and I am embracing what is to come, and I'm going to do this exercise that you recommended. Thank you so much. That was such a joy to talk with you, Scott.
Ishil, I love every conversation that we've had. Ishil has been on my broadcast. You can find that on the site as well. But I remember, I think we collided really in earnest in the writing a community when you were working on your book.
Yes.
And, you did a lot of courageous, important work so that you could bring your truth out into the world. I know you're making an incredible difference by sharing your unique gift and doing that work with and for people that you care about. So I just want to express my appreciation for them having this moment with you, but also just because I'm witnessing the difference that you're making out there in the world, and it's inspiring, and I'm cheering you on.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very happy right now. Oh, now in addition to the open heart, I feel uplifted with the energy that I received from you. So thank you very much, and we will continue the conversation and our collaboration forward. So I am ending this broadcast here. Thank you very much all for tuning in, and thank you for listening it afterwards. It will be on Unique Careers, Unique Lives podcast. All the best. Take care.
Thanks.